It all began on a stormy Tuesday morning, the kind where the sky stays gray no matter how late the day gets. The kind of morning that makes you wonder if the sun gave up entirely. Inside a grand mansion just outside the city, 10 of the country's most renowned doctors stood in a semicircle, looking down at the fragile body of Henry Langford, a man whose name alone could shake stock markets. Once the pinnacle of health and ambition, Henry now lay still, his breath shallow, the color drained from his face like a faded photograph. They had tried everything. Machines beeped steadily, IVs ran down his arms like tangled vines, and hushed voices filled the sterile space that used to be his lavish bedroom. His empire, built over 4 decades, was crumbling not from a hostile takeover or scandal, but from something no one could quite name. An illness with no diagnosis, no precedent, no mercy. Dr. Patel, a world-class neurologist, was the last to speak. "We've done everything medically possible. There's no logical explanation. It's like his body's giving up, but not because it has to. It's like he chose it." Silence fell over the room. A choice? Henry Langford was a man who never surrendered. Not even in courtrooms. Not in war zones. Not in board meetings where billion-dollar deals teetered on his decisions. The idea that he would give up now was absurd. And then there was her, Rosa, the maid who'd worked in the Langford mansion for nearly a decade, mostly ignored, often spoken to only in orders or glances. She'd always kept to herself, quiet, observant, moving through the house like a ghost with a broom. But something changed that morning. She stood at the edge of the hallway, watching the doctors pack up their equipment, their faces hard with frustration and failure. She wasn't supposed to be there, not in that part of the house, not when the important people were around. But she stepped forward anyway. "May I see him?" she asked softly. Her voice was barely audible over the rain. Dr. Patel looked up, puzzled. The other doctors exchanged tired glances, too defeated to respond. It was the nurse, Angela, who spoke. "He's not conscious. He won't know you're there." Rosa nodded but didn't move. "Still, please." They let her in. Perhaps because they had no reason to say no. Perhaps because, in that moment, hope had packed its bags and left hours ago. She walked into the room slowly, her footsteps silent on the marble floor. She pulled a wooden chair beside his bed, the kind you'd never find in a hospital, the kind that belonged to kitchens and quiet talks. And she sat. Then, without fanfare or drama, Rosa reached into the pocket of her apron and pulled out something small. A folded paper. Worn, creased from time, soft around the edges. She opened it gently and began to read aloud. Not in English, not in Spanish, but in a language older than both, one only her grandmother used to whisper by candlelight. What happened next didn't make sense. But then again, nothing about this illness ever had. Henry's breathing changed. First slower, then stronger. Angela watched from the hallway, one hand still resting on the cart of medical supplies. She wasn't sure what she was witnessing. A ritual? A prayer? A goodbye? But what struck her wasn't the words Rosa spoke, but the weight behind them. It wasn't just language. It was presence. Inside the room, Rosa's voice remained steady, even when her eyes welled up. She was remembering something as she spoke. A distant memory, a scar woven into time. Her fingers gently rested over Henry's hand, and for a brief second he twitched. No one noticed, but she did. As the reading continued, the air in the room grew denser. Not heavy in a suffocating way, but full, as if something unseen had entered, something ancient. The kind of presence that made your skin rise in goosebumps, even if the temperature never changed. Angela, still watching, felt it. Even the monitors in the room responded, heart rate rising slightly, rhythm evening out. The flat line of hopelessness started to curve with life. Henry's eyelids fluttered. Angela rushed in. His pulse, it's stabilizing. He's responding. The doctors returned in seconds, scrambling like they'd just been told their diplomas were lies. Dr. Patel checked the vitals, his expression shifting from skepticism to something he rarely wore. Awe. "This shouldn't be happening," he whispered. Rosa stood up, folding the paper carefully and sliding it back into her apron. "He's not out of danger yet," she said, calm as a lake at dawn. "But he's on the path." Dr. Jensen, the eldest among the physicians, narrowed his eyes. "What did you do?" Rosa didn't answer directly. She looked at Henry, then back at the group. "Sometimes it's not about curing the body. It's about reminding the soul why it should stay." They didn't understand. Not really. But none of them questioned her either. Henry slept for the next 12 hours, undisturbed, his condition steadily improving. The doctors monitored him in shifts, noting every small sign like it was a miracle because, in their world of charts and calculations, it was. Meanwhile, Rosa went back to her duties. Washing linens, polishing floors, dusting bookshelves in rooms where no one ever sat anymore. But her presence was different now. The staff noticed. Even the butler, who rarely said a word to her, paused to nod in the hallway. Word spread quickly, first among the household, then to the board of Langford's company, and soon to his estranged family who hadn't set foot in the mansion in years. And still Rosa said nothing. Not about the paper. Not about the language. Not about how she knew what to do when the best of the best had failed. But deep inside, she knew this wasn't over. Healing a man like Henry Langford wasn't just a matter of reviving his body. It meant facing what broke him in the first place. And whatever that was, hadn't left yet. When Henry finally opened his eyes, it was 3:47 a.m. The room was dark, lit only by the moonlight slipping through the open curtains. He didn't speak, didn't move much, just stared at the ceiling like he was trying to remember where he was, or maybe who. Rosa was there, not hovering, not watching, but sitting silently in the far corner, folding napkins like nothing extraordinary had happened. She looked up briefly and their eyes met. Henry blinked, confused. Then he whispered, hoarsely, "You." It wasn't a question. It was recognition. Rosa nodded once, then stood. "Don't try to talk. You need rest." He watched her for a moment longer, then let his eyes close again. But the whisper of her presence lingered, like incense after the flame dies. By morning, Henry was alert enough to eat. It was only broth, but it was more than he'd been able to take in for days. The doctors were stunned. Their reports were flooded with disclaimers. Vitals returning to normal, brain activity stabilizing, infection markers vanishing. None of it made sense. Yet there it was, clear as daylight. Dr. Patel called an emergency meeting with the team. "We need to re-examine the entire case. Look for anomalies, missed clues, maybe even psychosomatic catalysts. Something caused this shift. And it wasn't anything we administered." Angela, standing by the doorway, cleared her throat. "Maybe you should ask her." Patel frowned. "Ask who?" "The maid." "Rosa." A few of them chuckled. Others looked uncomfortable. But Angela didn't flinch. "I was there. She did something. I don't know what, but it wasn't just superstition. It changed the air in that room." Dr. Jensen sighed. "We're scientists, Angela. We need data, not stories." And yet, none of them had explanations. Only results. Meanwhile, Henry grew stronger by the hour. His memory returned in pieces. Not just of recent events, but old ones. His childhood in a tiny flat above a bakery. His mother humming through the walls. The first time he'd lied to close a deal. He remembered the things he had buried so deep beneath wealth and walls that he forgot they mattered. One afternoon, he asked for Rosa. Not the doctors, not the shareholders. Not his estranged son who had finally flown in from Zurich. Just Rosa. She entered the room, drying her hands on her apron. "You asked for me?" Henry nodded. "Sit, please." She hesitated, then did. He studied her face. "I know your voice," he said. "From a dream. Or maybe something deeper." Rosa said nothing. "Who are you?" This time her response was slow. "Just someone who remembers things most people forget." He tilted his head. "Like what?" She stood up. "Like how to listen when someone's soul is screaming." Before he could ask more, she left. Quietly, just like she always had. But something in Henry shifted. Something irreversible. Henry couldn't sleep that night. Not because of pain, the pain was gone, but because silence now carried a weight it never used to. He stared out the window, watching the breeze tug at the treetops. He was remembering moments he had no business remembering. Moments he had crushed beneath ambition, distractions, and layers of gold. He remembered the first time he stepped over someone to climb a little higher. He remembered the faces of workers he laid off with nothing but a letter, the promises he broke to keep a boardroom smiling. And he remembered his wife. Not the glamorous woman who posed beside him in magazines, but the quiet, curious girl he once wrote poems to. The girl who disappeared long before the divorce ever came. For the first time in decades, Henry Langford felt something he couldn't write off with a check or smother with luxury. Regret. And it stung worse than any fever. Rosa appeared at sunrise with a small bowl of soup and a cloth folded perfectly beside it. She said nothing, just placed the tray on his lap and moved to open the windows, letting the breeze sweep the corners of the room. "Do you ever get angry?" Henry asked suddenly. Rosa paused, her hand still on the window latch. "At what?" "At people like me." She turned, her expression unreadable. "Anger is a flame. Some people burn from it. Others warm their hands and move on." He chuckled faintly. "And what did you do with yours?" "I turned it into prayer." Henry looked down at the soup, unsure whether to feel humbled or ashamed. "Maybe both." "Where did you learn that, whatever it was you said to me?" he asked. Rosa sat down. "From a woman who healed people long before medicine had names for thin." Henry couldn't sleep that night. Not because of pain, the pain was gone, but because silence now carried a weight it never used to. He stared out the window, watching the breeze tug at the treetops. He was remembering moments he had no business remembering. Moments he had crushed beneath ambition, distractions, and layers of gold. He remembered the first time he stepped over someone to climb a little higher. He remembered the faces of workers he laid off with nothing but a letter, the promises he broke to keep a boardroom smiling. And he remembered his wife. Not the glamorous woman who posed beside him in magazines, but the quiet, curious girl he once wrote poems to. The girl who disappeared long before the divorce ever came. For the first time in decades, Henry Langford felt something he couldn't write off with a check or smother with luxury. Regret. And it stung worse than any fever. Rosa appeared at sunrise with a small bowl of soup and a cloth folded perfectly beside it. She said nothing, just placed the tray on his lap and moved to open the windows, letting the breeze sweep the corners of the room. "Do you ever get angry?" Henry asked suddenly. Rosa paused, her hand still on the window latch. "At what?" "At people like me." She turned, her expression unreadable. "Anger is a flame. Some people burn from it. Others warm their hands and move on." He chuckled faintly. "And what did you do with yours?" "I turned it into prayer." Henry looked down at the soup, unsure whether to feel humbled or ashamed. "Maybe both." "Where did you learn that, whatever it was you said to me?" he asked. Rosa sat down. "From a woman who healed people long before medicine had names for thin." From that day on, something began to change within everyone in that house. It wasn't just about the billionaire who had escaped death. It was as if they were all being confronted with a truth they had long pretended not to see. Sometimes salvation comes from the least expected places, and pride blinds us to silent miracles. The maid, once invisible, had become the center of curious glances, some admiring, others suspicious, and a few even hostile. After all, no one likes to see their own arrogance dismantled so easily. She, however, remained the same, continuing to clean floors, prepare tea, and straighten the sheets with the same humble routine. But now, there was something different in the air whenever she walked by. The staff, once indifferent, began to treat her with more respect. The doctors who had failed her employer avoided direct contact, perhaps out of shame, perhaps fear of what she represented. The reminder that not all knowledge comes from books. The billionaire himself began to watch her with an attention beyond gratitude. He couldn't fully understand what she had done, but something inside him told him there was more to that woman than a simple act of faith or intuition. One quiet morning, he called her to sit beside him in the garden. The sun shone timidly, as if hesitant to intrude on their conversation. "Why did you do it?" he asked, his voice still weak but more alive than ever. The maid looked at him, smiled gently, and replied, "Because life taught me not to ignore others' pain, even when others ignore me, and because I saw that you still had something to do in this world." He fell silent, as if those words pierced him in a way no surgery ever could. "Something to do in this world," he repeated to himself, like rediscovering a forgotten purpose. In the following days, the billionaire began to change. He canceled meetings he once considered urgent. He asked to renovate a wing of his private hospital to provide free care for the homeless. He began visiting impoverished communities and listening to stories that had never reached his ears before. Stories of struggle, abandonment, faith, and survival. The maid remained nearby, discreet, like a shadow full of light. But now she was the one inspiring him. And the most surprising part, she asked for nothing in return. No recognition, no reward. Her greatest victory seemed to be witnessing the man she saved finally becoming human. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, he called her to the garden again. Tears filled his eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. "You saved me more than once," he said. "The first time it was my body, the second time my soul." She just smiled, wiped her hands on her apron, and answered, "The soul doesn't need much, it just needs to be seen." And for the first time, the most powerful man in that city felt truly alive. Not because of money or fame, but because someone no one saw had seen him when he needed it most. The days that followed brought a shift not only in Henry but in the very atmosphere of the mansion. Where once there was cold detachment and silent judgment, now lingered a fragile sense of awakening. Henry began to realize that healing wasn't just a matter of medicine or science. It was about connection, forgiveness, and truth. His walls, built over decades of ambition and pain, were slowly crumbling. Rosa continued her quiet presence, never asking for praise or recognition. She was there simply because she believed in something deeper than titles or wealth. One afternoon, as Henry sat by the grand fireplace, he turned to her and asked, "How did you learn to see what no one else could?" She looked at him thoughtfully. "My grandmother taught me. She said that the real sickness isn't always in the body. It's the silence in the heart. When people stop speaking their truth, that silence grows loud enough to break the body itself." Henry absorbed the words, feeling them settle in places he'd long ignored. He thought about his own silence, the things he never said to his children, the regrets buried beneath his empire. For the first time, he felt the weight of his own failings. The staff noticed changes too. The housekeeper, once aloof, now shared quiet smiles with Rosa. The chefs prepared meals with a newfound care, and even the security guards softened their stern gazes. It was as if Rosa's healing extended beyond Henry, reaching into the hearts of all who lived within those walls. One evening, Henry asked Rosa to join him for a walk in the gardens. The night was cool, stars scattered across the sky like distant promises. As they strolled among the blooming jasmine, Henry's voice trembled with vulnerability. "I've spent my life chasing success, but I forgot what truly matters. You reminded me of that." Rosa nodded gently. "It's never too late to start again. Healing isn't a straight path. It's a series of steps, sometimes backward, sometimes forward. But it always begins with courage." They paused by a small pond, the water reflecting their faces in ripples. Henry looked at his reflection, searching for the man he wanted to become. "What if I fail again?" She smiled softly. "Failure is just the start of wisdom. The brave are those who keep trying despite it." Over the following weeks, Henry began opening up more, to his family, to his staff, to the world beyond his mansion. He made peace with the past, apologized for his mistakes, and committed to using his power for good. The man who once seemed untouchable now wore humility like armor. And Rosa? She remained his quiet guardian, the unseen thread weaving the fractured pieces back together. Her simple act of faith had sparked a transformation no doctor could prescribe. One morning, as the sun spilled gold over the city, Henry called a press conference. The world watched as he announced new charitable initiatives, healthcare reforms, and a promise to listen, to truly listen, to the voices often ignored. In that moment, everyone understood. Sometimes the greatest healing comes from the most unexpected places. Not from wealth or status, but from the courage to see, to listen, and to believe. And in the heart of a mansion that had witnessed despair and hope, a maid's quiet strength had rewritten a story of loss into one of redemption. The ripple effects of Henry's transformation reached far beyond the walls of his mansion. His public announcements sparked conversations in boardrooms and back alleys alike, challenging people to rethink what true power meant. For years, Henry had been a symbol of ruthless ambition, a man who wielded wealth like a weapon. Now he was becoming something new, a beacon of humility and change. Rosa watched quietly from the sidelines, knowing that her role was never about the spotlight. She was the steady force behind the scenes, the keeper of truths that most preferred to ignore. Yet, even she was surprised by how deeply Henry's journey had touched others. Staff who had once viewed her as merely a servant now approached her with respect and curiosity. The same people who dismissed her years ago began to listen, to ask questions about the quiet wisdom she carried. But with change came resistance. Some family members bristled at Henry's newfound openness, uncomfortable with the spotlight shifting away from their inherited privilege. Executives who profited from the old ways whispered doubts and sowed discord. The media, always hungry for scandal, tried to uncover skeletons they believed would ruin the narrative. Yet Henry stood firm, bolstered by the quiet strength of the woman who had saved him. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset paint the sky with shades of amber and rose, Henry turned to Rosa and said, "I owe you more than I can say. You didn't just heal me. You changed the course of my life." She smiled, a gentle curve of lips that spoke of sacrifices and unseen battles. "You had the power all along," she said. "I only helped you find it again." The bond between them was unspoken but undeniable. Rosa wasn't just a maid. She was the soul of the mansion, the heartbeat that reminded everyone of what truly mattered. Henry's health continued to improve, but more importantly, his spirit was renewed. He began volunteering regularly at the hospital he had rebuilt, personally meeting patients who had nowhere else to turn. He listened to their stories with humility, offering help without judgment. Meanwhile, Rosa started organizing small community gatherings, teaching simple but profound lessons about resilience, kindness, and hope. She shared stories from her grandmother, stories of healing beyond medicine, of the invisible wounds that only compassion could mend. Together, they sparked a quiet revolution, one built on empathy rather than greed, on listening rather than commanding. As months turned into years, the mansion transformed from a place of solitude and secrecy into a sanctuary of healing and connection. Walls that once echoed with silence now rang with laughter, conversation, and the promise of new beginnings. And through it all, Rosa remained the steady light, a reminder that sometimes, the most unexpected person holds the power to change everything. As time passed, the changes within the mansion grew more profound, touching every life connected to Henry's world. The billionaire who once seemed untouchable had become a man transformed, not just physically, but in spirit. His past mistakes weighed on him, yet he no longer tried to bury them beneath walls of indifference. Instead, he faced them with honesty and resolve. The relationship between Henry and Rosa deepened, though it was never spoken aloud. They shared quiet moments of understanding, glances across the room, small gestures that said more than words ever could. Rosa's presence was a balm, a steady heartbeat grounding Henry as he navigated the complexities of redemption. One afternoon, Henry invited Rosa to the library, a room filled with leather-bound books and dusty memories. "I want to understand," he said softly. "Not just my story, but yours too." Rosa hesitated, then nodded. She began to speak of her childhood, of a world far removed from the luxury of the mansion. She spoke of hardships, loss, and the strength she found in the stories her grandmother told, stories of hope amid despair, of healing beyond what the eye can see. Henry listened intently, realizing that her strength came from a lifetime of unseen battles. Her faith was quiet but unshakable, a light that had guided her through darkness. It dawned on him that the miracle wasn't just what she had done for him, but the resilience she carried within herself. Inspired, Henry proposed a new initiative, one that would provide support for those struggling not only with physical ailments but with emotional and spiritual wounds as well. He wanted to create a sanctuary, a place where people could find healing beyond medicine, where compassion and understanding were the foundation. Rosa smiled, humbled yet hopeful. Together, they began planning, reaching out to communities and experts who shared their vision. It was an ambitious dream, but one fueled by the shared belief that every life mattered. Meanwhile, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Not everyone welcomed the changes. Some saw Henry's transformation as weakness, a betrayal of the ruthless empire he had built. Family members who had thrived on power and control pushed back, attempting to reclaim the narrative. Yet Henry stood firm, supported by Rosa's unwavering presence and the growing circle of allies who believed in their cause. He spoke openly about his journey, about the lessons learned in vulnerability and grace. The mansion, once a fortress of silence and secrets, was evolving into a beacon of hope and renewal. The walls no longer held echoes of despair, but carried the sounds of healing, laughter, conversation, and the quiet strength of community. One evening, as they walked through the garden under a canopy of stars, Henry turned to Rosa. "Thank you," he said simply, "for seeing me when no one else would." She smiled softly, her eyes reflecting the starlight. Sometimes, the greatest gift is to be seen. And in that moment, beneath the vast night sky, two souls bound by healing and hope found a connection that transcended words. The momentum of change inside the mansion was undeniable, yet with progress came growing challenges. Henry's commitment to transformation attracted attention far beyond his estate. Journalists, philanthropists, and skeptics all swarmed to witness the man who'd been saved by a humble maid. Some sought to expose weakness, others to celebrate redemption, but all were drawn by the unusual story. Inside the house, the atmosphere was a blend of hope and tension. Rosa remained a pillar of calm, navigating shifting dynamics with grace. The staff, once distant, now rallied around her, inspired by the vision unfolding before them. Even those who had doubted began to see the power of empathy and humility. Henry's children, however, wrestled with their own feelings. They were heirs to a vast fortune, yet suddenly faced a father who challenged their expectations. Family dinners became arenas of honest confrontation, where long-buried resentments surfaced. Yet, beneath the discord, seeds of understanding began to take root. One evening, Henry gathered everyone in the grand hall. His voice carried the weight of experience and hope. "We cannot change the past, but we can shape the future," he said. "This house will no longer be a symbol of division, but a place of healing, for us and for those we serve." The room held its breath. For the first time, walls that had separated them felt porous, fragile, and full of potential. Rosa watched quietly, proud of the man who had grown beyond his own limitations. Outside, the world was shifting too. Henry's charitable work expanded rapidly, touching communities that had once been ignored. Hospitals opened their doors to those without means. Education programs flourished. Hope was no longer just a word, but a tangible force. Despite the success, Henry remained grounded by Rosa's wisdom. She reminded him that true change requires patience and humility. "Transformation is a journey, not a destination," she said. "There will be setbacks, but we keep moving forward." Their bond, forged through adversity, was now unbreakable. Together, they faced the unknown with courage, proving that even the deepest wounds could be healed with love and persistence. With the mansion's transformation well underway, the public narrative shifted from skepticism to inspiration. Stories of Henry's change spread far and wide, touching lives and inspiring others to seek their own healing. Rosa, still humble and unassuming, became a quiet symbol of strength, an unexpected hero whose compassion sparked a revolution of the heart. The mansion itself became a hub of activity and hope. Programs were launched to support mental health, addiction recovery, and community development. Volunteers from all walks of life came to contribute, drawn by the vision of a better future. Henry, once isolated by his power and pride, now found joy in service. He spent hours listening to those he had overlooked, learning their stories, and sharing his own. His vulnerability became a bridge, connecting him to people he'd never imagined reaching. But challenges remained. Some old allies felt betrayed by Henry's new path and sought to undermine him. They whispered rumors, sabotaged efforts, and tried to regain control. Henry faced these attacks with grace, refusing to revert to old patterns of dominance. One stormy night, as thunder rolled across the sky, Henry confided in Rosa his fears. "Sometimes, I wonder if all this is worth it," he admitted. "If the walls we're breaking down will ever truly fall." Rosa took his hand, steady and warm. "Change is never easy, but the greatest victories come from the hardest battles. Remember why you started." Her words renewed his spirit. They reminded him that healing was not just personal. It was a mission that demanded resilience and faith. Together, they continued to build, brick by brick, a legacy not of wealth or power, but of love and redemption. Their story was a testament to the transformative power of seeing and being seen, of hope in the face of despair. Years passed, and the mansion's legacy blossomed into something far greater than Henry or Rosa had ever imagined. What began as a quiet act of compassion had ignited a movement, one that reached beyond borders and inspired countless lives. Henry's health remained strong, not because of medicine alone, but because of the renewed purpose that filled his days. He had become a man defined not by his fortune, but by his generosity and humility. Rosa's influence continued to ripple outward. She founded community centers, workshops, and support groups focused on holistic healing, mind, body, and spirit. Her grandmother's teachings lived on through every life she touched. The mansion, once a symbol of solitude and silence, had become a beacon of light and connection. People traveled from distant places to experience its warmth and learn from the story of the maid who saved a billionaire. At a grand celebration marking the 10th anniversary of Henry's recovery, friends, family, and community members gathered in the sprawling gardens. Speeches were made, tears were shed, and laughter filled the air. Henry took the stage, his eyes searching the crowd until they met Rosa's. He spoke softly but firmly. "This journey taught me that true strength lies in vulnerability, and that healing begins when we allow ourselves to be seen. None of this would have been possible without Rosa, the woman who saw me when no one else did." The crowd erupted in applause, but Henry's gaze never left Rosa's. She smiled, her heart full, knowing that the greatest gift she had given was not just healing a man, but inspiring a world. And so, the story that began with a single promise, the promise of a maid who dared to see beyond illness and status, continued to unfold, reminding everyone that sometimes the most unexpected heroes changed the course of history. The mansion, once a place shadowed by silence and secrets, had become a sanctuary of healing and hope. Henry's journey, inspired by Rosa's quiet strength, transformed not just his own life but rippled outward, touching the lives of many who had long been forgotten by society. The community centers Rosa established flourished, offering refuge to those struggling with pain, physical, emotional, or spiritual. At these centers, stories unfolded, stories of struggle, resilience, and rebirth. People from all walks of life came seeking more than medical care. They sought understanding, compassion, and a chance to reclaim their dignity. Rosa's teachings, passed down from her grandmother, emphasized the power of empathy and the courage to face one's own wounds without shame. Henry, once defined by his wealth and power, now found his true legacy in these moments of connection. He visited the centers often, not as a distant benefactor, but as a student of human resilience. His humility deepened, as did his determination to dismantle the barriers that had once separated the privileged from the forgotten. Yet, despite the progress, the shadows of the past lingered. Old rivals and critics continued to challenge Henry's efforts, skeptical that true change could come from a man who once embodied the system they opposed. Rumors circulated, Attempts to discredit the movement surfaced, but Henry and Rosa remained steadfast. One afternoon, as a gentle rain tapped against the windows, Henry sat with Rosa in the quiet study. "Sometimes," he confessed, "I wonder if the world is ready for what we're building." She smiled softly, her eyes reflecting years of wisdom. "The world is always ready for love, Henry. It's people who must learn to accept it." Their partnership, forged through trials and triumphs, became a symbol of hope. Together, they showed that healing was not a destination but a continuous journey, one that demanded courage, patience, and above all, the willingness to see the humanity in every soul. With each passing year, the impact of Henry and Rosa's work grew. The mansion, once an emblem of isolation and privilege, had transformed into a beacon of community and compassion. People traveled from far and wide to learn from their example, to witness firsthand the power of humility and grace. Rosa's story became one of quiet legend. The maid who saw what no one else could, who believed in the impossible, and who through simple acts of kindness sparked a revolution. Her life was a testament to the truth that greatness often hides in the most unexpected places. Henry's transformation inspired not only his family but also business leaders and policymakers. He used his influence to advocate for systemic change, pushing for healthcare reforms, educational opportunities, and social programs aimed at breaking cycles of poverty and despair. But amid the growing public attention, Henry never lost sight of the personal journey that had begun with a promise. A promise made in the quietest of moments by a woman who refused to give up on him. That promise was a reminder that true healing comes from being seen and accepted, flaws and all. One evening, during a gala held in honor of their work, Henry took a moment to speak privately with Rosa. The room buzzed with applause and celebration, but their conversation was intimate and profound. "Do you remember the day you saved me?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. She nodded, eyes shining. "I remember believing you could be more than your pain. And you were right," he said. "You showed me how to live again, not through medicine, but through love." Their story was no longer just theirs. It had become a beacon, a guiding light for anyone struggling to find hope in darkness. And in that shared moment, they knew the journey was far from over. The journey ahead remained uncertain, but Henry and Rosa faced it with unwavering resolve. The movement they had ignited continued to spread, touching lives and inspiring change in communities far beyond the mansion's walls. Rosa's vision expanded to include training programs for caregivers and healers, emphasizing compassion alongside clinical skill. She believed that true healing required seeing the whole person, not just the illness or the injury, but the story behind it. Henry embraced his new role as an advocate, traveling extensively to share his experience and promote the values that had reshaped his life. He spoke candidly about vulnerability, the power of empathy, and the courage required to confront one's own demons. Their partnership, built on mutual respect and a shared mission, became a model for others seeking to bridge divides and foster understanding. Together, they proved that even the most entrenched barriers could be dismantled with patience, kindness, and unwavering faith in humanity. One morning, as dawn painted the sky with hues of gold, Henry and Rosa stood side by side in the garden, reflecting on all that had changed. "We started with a promise," Rosa said softly. "A promise to see beyond the surface." Henry nodded, taking her hand. And that promise changed everything. As the first light touched their faces, they knew their story was a living testament, that sometimes the smallest acts of courage could ignite the greatest transformations. And so, their journey continued, one of hope, healing, and the unbreakable power of being truly seen. The years following the transformation brought a profound shift not only in Henry and Rosa's lives, but also in the countless individuals touched by their work. The mansion had become a sanctuary, its walls echoing with stories of healing, resilience, and newfound hope. What began as a quiet promise had blossomed into a movement that inspired change far beyond the estate's grounds. Henry, once defined by power and wealth, now found his identity rooted in service and humility. He traveled across cities and countries, sharing his story openly and honestly. His message was clear: True strength is found not in dominance but in vulnerability, in the willingness to confront one's flaws and to embrace healing. Rosa, meanwhile, continued to nurture the heart of their shared mission. She expanded the community centers, developed training programs for caregivers, and hosted workshops that blended traditional medicine with holistic approaches. Her belief that every person's story mattered resonated deeply with those she taught and healed. Their work was not without obstacles. Old systems resisted change, and skepticism lingered in some corners. Yet, Henry and Rosa remained undeterred, buoyed by the growing number of lives transformed and the bonds they forged within communities. They saw firsthand how kindness and understanding could rebuild fractured lives and heal unseen wounds. One afternoon, in a quiet moment beneath the sprawling branches of an ancient oak, Henry reflected aloud. I never imagined that the greatest lesson I would learn came from a woman I barely noticed. She taught me that to truly heal, we must first be seen. Rosa smiled, her eyes warm. And that lesson isn't just for you. It's for all of us. Healing begins with connection, when we see each other as whole, imperfect, and worthy. Together, they continued walking the path they had started, their steps steady, their purpose unwavering. Their story was no longer just a tale of recovery, but a living testament to the transformative power of empathy, courage, and hope as their mission grew. So did the community that rallied around it. Volunteers, healthcare professionals, educators, and ordinary people who believed in change joined forces with Henry and Rosa. The mansion, once a private refuge, evolved into a hub of collaboration, a place where ideas blossomed and collective action flourished. Henry's public appearances became less about prestige and more about connection. He listened intently to those he met, learning from their struggles and triumphs. His speeches were filled with honesty and humility, inspiring many to rethink what it meant to lead and to serve. Rosa's workshops grew in popularity, attracting people eager to learn how to bring compassion into their own lives and professions. She taught that healing was not just about fixing what was broken but about honoring the entire human experience, the joys, the pains, the complexities. But the journey was far from easy. Old wounds, both personal and societal, occasionally resurfaced. Skeptics questioned their motives, critics challenged their methods, and moments of doubt tested their resolve. Yet each challenge was met with grace and determination. One evening, after a particularly taxing day, Henry confided in Rosa his fears. Sometimes I wonder if we're making a real difference, he admitted. If all this effort can truly change lives on the scale we hope. Rosa squeezed his hand gently. Change takes time. What we're building is a foundation not just for today, but for generations to come. Every life touched is a seed planted. Her faith rekindled his spirit. He realized that true impact wasn't always immediate or visible but was measured in the countless small victories. The smiles, the stories, the quiet moments of breakthrough. Together, they continued their work, fueled by a shared vision that healing was a gift accessible to all, born from seeing and honoring each person's unique journey. The mansion's legacy deepened as Henry and Rosa's story became a beacon of hope for many. What had started as a personal transformation grew into a movement that transcended boundaries, inspiring people across cultures and continents. Henry's health remained steady, sustained not only by medical care but by the sense of purpose that had breathed new life into him. He was no longer the isolated billionaire of old, but a man deeply connected to community, compassion, and change. Rosa's influence expanded beyond the mansion's grounds. She partnered with organizations worldwide, sharing her approach to holistic healing and community building. Her grandmother's wisdom, rooted in empathy and resilience, became a guiding light for countless caregivers and healers. One crisp autumn morning, Henry and Rosa stood together at the site of a new community center. Children's laughter filled the air, and colorful murals told stories of hope and unity. Henry turned to Rosa and said, "This is more than I ever dreamed." She smiled, her eyes reflecting the vibrant energy around them. It's just the beginning. Their partnership, forged in unlikely circumstances, had grown into a force for transformation. They had shown that even the deepest wounds could heal when met with kindness, courage, and the willingness to be seen. As the sun set behind the hills, casting golden light over the new center. Henry and Rosa knew their journey was ongoing. The promise that began it all remained alive, a testament to the power of hope, healing, and the extraordinary strength found in unexpected places. The foundation that Henry and Rosa had built continued to grow, reaching into places once untouched by hope or healing. What had started as a single promise between two unlikely allies evolved into a movement capable of inspiring entire communities. As their mission expanded, so did the challenges but also the victories. In towns and cities far beyond the mansion's walls, community centers inspired by Rosa's vision began to emerge. These places welcomed those burdened by life's hardships, offering not only medical aid but a compassionate ear and a renewed sense of dignity. The blend of clinical care and empathetic listening became a model replicated by many. Henry, once confined by his towering wealth and status, found freedom in vulnerability. He spoke openly about his past mistakes and how a simple act of faith from a maid had shifted the trajectory of his life. His transparency resonated, reminding people that change often begins with humility. Yet the opposition persisted. There were moments when entrenched systems resisted, and old power brokers attempted to undermine the progress. Yet Henry and Rosa met every challenge not with retaliation, but with patience and grace, turning critics into collaborators when possible, or peacefully persisting when not. One chilly evening, as winter whispered through the trees, Henry reflected aloud. Sometimes I wonder how a single promise could ripple out so far, how one person's belief can change a life and then a world. Rosa smiled quietly. It's the power of seeing, really seeing someone, that starts the ripple. It reminds us all that we are connected, and that healing is a collective journey. Their partnership remained rooted in this truth. And though the journey was far from over, they moved forward with steady hearts and open hands, committed to the work that had already changed so many lives. Years passed, and Henry and Rosa's vision continued to inspire transformation across continents. Their work demonstrated that healing was more than physical recovery. It was about restoring hope, dignity, and human connection. The mansion, once a symbol of isolation, had become a global beacon for holistic healing. Visitors arrived from faraway lands to learn from their approach, eager to replicate its success in their own communities. The model was simple but profound. Blend science with compassion, and never forget the power of being truly seen. Henry's role evolved into that of a mentor and advocate. His speeches, filled with heartfelt stories of vulnerability and redemption, encouraged others to embrace humility and service. Rosa's teachings, steeped in ancestral wisdom, spread widely, influencing healthcare workers, social activists, and everyday people alike. Yet they never lost sight of the personal connection that sparked it all. In quiet moments, Henry often thanked Rosa for believing in him when others had given up. And Rosa reminded Henry that their journey was a shared one, a testament to what could be achieved when two people dared to hope. One summer evening, as the sun dipped low, they sat side by side on the mansion's veranda. The air was filled with the scent of jasmine and the sounds of life flourishing around them. Henry turned to Rosa and said, "This journey has changed everything, not just for me, but for all who have walked with us." Rosa nodded, her heart full. "And it will continue to change lives, long after we're gone." Their story, born from a single act of courage, had become a legacy, a reminder that sometimes the smallest gestures hold the greatest power to transform the world. The journey of healing and transformation forged by Henry and Rosa entered a new phase, one marked by deeper impact and wider influence. Their efforts extended beyond their immediate communities, sparking dialogues about equity, compassion, and the human spirit. Rosa's community centers flourished, evolving into training hubs that empowered caregivers and activists worldwide. The emphasis on holistic healing, integrating mind, body, and soul, inspired a shift in healthcare paradigms. People learned that to truly heal, one must embrace the whole person, not just the symptoms. Henry's advocacy reached halls of power. He spoke before governments and organizations, urging leaders to prioritize empathy and social justice. His message was clear: no one is truly healthy unless the most vulnerable among us are cared for. His transformation embodied the possibility of change, giving hope to those disillusioned by broken systems. Yet amidst this growth, the heart of their mission remained unchanged. The promise Rosa had made on a quiet day, seeing Henry when no one else could. That promise had sparked a revolution, showing that compassion has the power to rewrite destinies. One chilly morning, as frost kissed the gardens, Henry and Rosa stood together, watching the sunrise. Henry took Rosa's hand and said, "It all began with you seeing me. That sight gave me life." She smiled, squeezing his hand. "And that life gave us the chance to change so many others." Together, they faced the future. Not as billionaire and Maid, but as partners in a lifelong mission to heal, to hope, and to remind the world that sometimes the greatest power lies in the simplest act of seeing. As the years wound down, Henry and Rosa reflected on a journey that had transformed not only their lives but also the lives of countless others. The mansion, once a symbol of isolation and despair, had become a living testament to hope, healing, and human connection. Their partnership, born of unexpected kindness, had grown into a force that transcended wealth, status, and circumstance. Henry often found himself humbled by the realization that his greatest lessons had come from the quietest of voices. Rosa, with her unwavering faith and gentle strength, had shown him what it meant to truly see another person. Not just their illness or their mistakes, but their full humanity. Together, they had built more than foundations and programs. They had built bridges between worlds often divided by class, power, and pain. Their story was a reminder that healing is never a solitary act but a collective journey, woven from compassion, courage, and the willingness to be vulnerable. One crisp morning, standing in the garden where so many had found solace, Henry turned to Rosa. "I never imagined that a single promise could change everything. You taught me the meaning of hope." She smiled, eyes shimmering with tears. "And you taught me the power of belief. We were each other's miracle." Their hands clasped, a symbol of a bond forged through trials, triumphs, and unwavering commitment. And as the sun rose higher, casting golden light over the world they had touched, they knew their story would live on, not just in memories, but in every life their journey had changed. In the quiet moments that followed, Henry and Rosa embraced the peace that comes from a life well lived and a mission fulfilled. They had faced darkness together and emerged into light, proving that even the deepest wounds could heal with faith and compassion. The mansion's walls, once witnesses to silence and sorrow, now echoed with laughter, stories, and the rhythms of life renewed. Community members gathered regularly to share their journeys, their victories, and their hopes for the future. The spaces Rosa had created thrived on the belief that every person deserved to be seen, heard, and loved. Henry's transformation had rippled through industries, inspiring leaders to rethink success and embrace vulnerability. His legacy was not the empire he once ruled, but the humanity he reclaimed. He spoke often about the power of connection, reminding audiences that true healing begins when we open our hearts to one another. Rosa remained the quiet heart of their shared vision, a beacon of empathy and strength. Her wisdom, rooted in generations of love and resilience, continued to guide those seeking healing beyond medicine. One evening, as they watched the stars emerge in a velvet sky, Henry whispered, "Thank you for seeing me when no one else did." Rosa's smile was soft and knowing. "And thank you for choosing to be seen." Their journey, marked by courage, humility, and grace, had shown the world that sometimes the most unexpected heroes change the course of history. As the story of Henry and Rosa reached its final chapter, it stood as a testament to the transformative power of compassion and the enduring strength found in human connection. Their unlikely bond had rewritten the narrative of healing, one not defined by medicine alone, but by the courage to see and be seen. They had begun as two strangers from different worlds, brought together by circumstance and an unwavering promise. Through challenges and victories, laughter and tears, they discovered that true healing is a shared journey, one that transcends status, wealth, and prejudice. The mansion, now a beacon of hope, continued to inspire generations. Its walls held the echoes of lives changed, of hearts mended, and of futures reclaimed. Rosa's legacy lived on through the countless souls she had touched, while Henry's transformation served as a powerful reminder that no one is beyond redemption. On a quiet morning, bathed in the gentle light of dawn, Henry and Rosa stood side by side, their hearts full. "This is just the beginning," Henry said, his voice steady with conviction. Rosa nodded, eyes bright, because every act of kindness creates ripples that never truly end. And so, their story closed not with an ending, but with a promise. A promise that the power to heal and transform lies within us all, waiting to be awakened by a single act of seeing, a single act of love.